So, hey everybody, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Amanda. I'm from the Sales Hub and CRM Hub. I am the Hub leader from RevPartners. We have got amazing, wonderful Hannah today. She is going to blow your mind with this growth-driven CRM. Your CRM is a product, not a project. We are so excited to have her join us today. And she is the director of RevOps at RevPartners. She specializes in CRM implementations and RevOps wizardry. She's very passionate about making adoptable processes that make your flywheel go around. And I will hand it over to her so we can learn all about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. I'm super excited to be here. Like Amanda said, I'm Hannah Rubin. I'm the director of RevOps here at RevPartners. And I'm super excited to be joining this HubSpot user group today to talk about one of my favorite things, which is how to treat your CRM like a product, not a project. Really gets me riled up. So this is going to be really fun. Just a quick run through of the agenda. We're going to start off with really like why project-based implementations of CRMs fail so often and why I think you should use a product-based approach when it comes to launching a CRM. So I'll spend about 10 minutes there just kind of setting the stage on, why we're recommending what we're recommending. And then I'll move into how to ensure user adoption. We're going to talk about how to use developer operations principles to ensure user adoptions of your CRM as a product. And then we're going to talk about creating and structuring a RevOps team before we get into the nitty gritty of like how to actually build a team or like hire for these positions and roles. We're going to talk more about like what exactly is RevOps, what's the end state of a RevOps team when it comes to using a RevOps team to manage your CRM as a product. I'm going to hopefully have about 5 minutes left over for some Q&A. So Amanda's going to be managing the Q&A box. If you have questions that come up, just go ahead and drop those in that chat. She will hold those, prioritize them, and then we'll get to them at the end. And then as always, if we don't get to your questions, please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, connect to me, shoot me an email or a message, and we'll get your questions answered. Cool. All right, let's do it. So we're going to go straight into it. Why project-based implementations are never a good idea. So listen, your CRM is not and should not and cannot be a one and done. According to multiple studies, there was one done by the Merkle Group a few years back that said approximately 63% of CRM initiatives were considered failures. That's a really high percentage, guys. That's massive. Another one that Capterra did a couple of years later said that 55% of CRM projects fail. So that's already two like well-known studies that are saying that these project-based approaches are not producing results. And so the reason why that is really because of three reasons, in my opinion. Number one, you have lots of unknown unknowns. When you think about creating a project plan for implementing something as large as a CRM, you have to think like 6 months in advance. And if you're thinking about like this waterfall approach of here every single step that I need to get done, anytime an unknown comes up, it's going to produce blockers essentially. The second main reason, and we'll dive into all these a little bit deeper here in a minute, but the second main reason is lack of ownership. If you don't have someone owning your CRM or a team owning your CRM, you can't expect it to be a reliable source of truth that will ultimately drive business improvements. And then number three, maintenance. This ties into a lack of ownership. If no one is overseeing the CRM, all of the hard work that you put into setting it up is just going to go straight down the drain in a few months if you don't have anyone maintaining and ensuring adoption. So some high-level benefits of product-based approach. First, you're going to be much more efficient with your time. You're going to be able to get into the system, start using the system, start reaping the benefits of a CRM much sooner if you approach a product-based mindset versus a project-based. Agility and scalability. Back to those unknown unknowns. Anytime you have these issues that arise or things change that are external to the system or to your organization, in a standard project-based approach, you're not going to be able to adapt to those quickly. When you have a product-based approach, you're able to work with what's happening around you and react and adapt accordingly. And then third, the biggest, most important one, in my opinion, you'll be more likely to increase adoption of your CRM when you're focusing on it as a product rather than a project. So let's dive into it a little bit deeper and break it down line by line. So when you're looking at your CRM as a project, we talked about these unknowns. Look, the reality is you don't ever know what you don't know. When you scope out a CRM launch as a project, you're often making assumptions based off of what you think you know, but you're not ever going to know what you don't know. And so an example of this would be maybe you want to ensure that you're integrating your data sources correctly, but you don't have your integrations properly scoped. And so when you start to build the integration, you hit a roadblock and it becomes a blocker to use. You're not able to further the project until you solve that issue. Now, if you view it as a product, you're able to uncover and address issues as you go. So you're able to iterate and adapt and look at these issues that pop up and say, is this a priority? Is this something we need to address in regards to launching our minimum viable product of our CRM? Or can it wait until after we launch it, we can address it as a feature? You're able to consistently weigh the pros and cons of these shifting priorities. Number two, time to use. When you're looking at it as a project, oftentimes getting your team in and using this system is dependent on a significant scope of work. So you're looking at, all right, we are going to build out the entire system. We're going to do X, Y, and Z over the course of 6 months. And then we'll get your sales team in and your marketing team and your service team, because everything will then be fully built. The reality is you're never going to have a fully built CRM because your business is always going to be growing and changing. And so when you look at it like that, you're often getting to that 6 months, your team is getting into the system and you don't know how well it's going to perform. If you're looking at it as a product, you're establishing a minimum viable product for your CRM. You're establishing what your minimum requirements are. We'll get more into this when we talk about specific DevOps principles. When you're looking at it with this lens of an MVP, you're able to get your team in quicker, start getting feedback from them, and start growing the CRM and using the CRM, creating a reliable central source of truth. Number three, lack of long-term ownership. So when you're looking at your CRM as a project and you don't have anyone owning it post-project completion, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with poor data governance. Not only are you going to end up with processes not adopted, you're also going to end up with data just spiraling out of control because of those processes not being adopted. When you have a product-based approach, you have a product owner, you have a RevOps team or a RevOps leader that's focused purely on maintaining and growing your CRM. And so you're going to, your CRM will result in both better process adoption and data governance because of it. So your CRM will actually be reliable. You can actually learn from it and grow from it. Number four, feedback loops. This is a huge one, and we'll talk a lot about this when we get into our DevOps principles section. But when you're looking at this project-based approach, you're building out a 6-month timeline, you're getting to the end of that 6-month timeline, then you're getting your teams in, you're not able to actually get feedback until the end of that project build. And then you're not able to hear what users have to say. You're making a lot of assumptions along the way. By the end of it, is it a system that they actually want to use and adopt? There's no space for that along the way. Whereas if you have a product-based approach, you're constantly checking in with your team, making sure that the CRM is doing what they need it to, that the processes you've built are adoptable, and then you're increasing adoption, which means that your data is going to be more reliable. And then lastly, we're looking at 6 months post-implementation, 6 months after your team is in there using it. as you can see, all of the left-hand side is adding up to 6 months post-implementation. Your CRM is essentially spiraled out of control and will likely fail. When you're looking at it as a product, though, you're iterating consistently and continuously. You're constantly getting feedback from teams. You're constantly looking at the data and understanding what's happening, making adjustments to your processes accordingly. And then 6 months down the road, your CRM is not only larger, more adopted, more reliable, but it's also easier to use and more central to your business. All right, so how do we approach our CRM as a product instead of a project? We're going to use this concept of minimum viable product. So first, what you'll need to do is identify what that minimum viable product is. What are the core requirements that you need your CRM to do? You're going to want to gain alignment from multiple teams, multiple stakeholders across your organization, and you want to make sure that you're separating your wants from your needs. So you want to make sure that you're establishing what your CRM actually needs to be able to do. What are the foundational KPIs that you need to be measuring? It could be number of leads generated, number of deals generated, time to close your deals, number of amount of revenue, closed one. Some foundational KPIs that you need to get established, and then use that to then build your MVP. Don't get distracted here. Your MVP should be your true north. This is what you're going to use as your priorities. You're clearly defining your end state, and so you're working to reach that end state. And then anytime you come across something else, listen, every team is going to ask for something. They're going to ask for notifications. They're going to ask for automation. They're going to ask for streamlined processes here and there. And you want to always be measuring that against your MVP. It's not a bad thing to require some manual work at the beginning as you're starting to build this MVP. The last part is adoption. And this is going to be the hardest, but the most important part. User utilization is going to be your true north for your product actually succeeding. So because of that, the adoption is going to be your most important metric. It's going to allow your users to not only use the system in a way that produces data that's reliable and allows you to grow and improve your business, but it's also going to allow your users to request feature updates from your product manager, your RevOps team, to then grow the CRM. So it's going to be really key to lead with an iterative approach. Anytime you're rolling out a new feature release, once you've established your MVP, you're rolling out new feature releases following this exact same process. So you're gaining alignment, you're understanding what the end state is, you're building it out, and then you're adopting it. Anytime you're rolling out the MVP or any feature release, you want to start with the why. You want to explain to your team why this is so important, why it's important to the business, to their day-to-day. And then you want to make sure that you're monitoring key KPIs so that you're ensuring the adoption of that MVP or of that feature release. And then you want to have that feedback loop built in. So that feedback loop will continue to produce more and more feature requests. And so that feedback loop might look like your team submitting requests directly to a RevOps team. So maybe a marketing team requests certain automation, maybe the sales team requests an improved process. Or it could look like the RevOps team looks directly at the data and understands what is the data telling me needs to be done next. And then we're continuously weighing what needs to be prioritized based off of what the team's requesting and what the data is saying. All right, so let's talk about ensuring adoption. We're going to focus on using this concept of developer operations principle. So think about developers, how they build apps or how they build websites. This is really how you want to start thinking about your CRM. So first off, you want to be agile. You want to iterate. We talked about this in the last slide. You want to build out your MVP and then consistently release different features. So this is your iterative development that will allow you to really embrace change. It's going to allow you to react to what's happening outside of your CRM, what's happening in the market, what are your users saying, what is your customer saying? And it's going to also allow you to react to what's happening inside. What is your marketing team saying? What is your sales team saying? It's going to foster collaboration across teams. It will also decrease your time to value by being agile and working on a weekly or bi-weekly setting where you're constantly reevaluating priorities and what needs to be built and what needs to be rolled out. There's no more, oh, thanks for your request, we'll talk about it in 6 months when we do our next planning session. You're able to actually adapt and reprioritize more quickly. And all of that will allow you to continuously improve your CRM and ultimately the data that it is producing. Monitoring and feedback loops. So one of the most important things that developers do when rolling out a new app or when launching a website is they do what's called a soft launch. So they'll roll out the website to a specific group of people. They'll have those users interact with the website and they'll just watch. They'll say, okay, how are you using this? And does it meet what I assumed you would act, the way that I assumed you would act? So this is really helpful for you to make sure that you're not making assumptions about how your user will be using the CRM. And you want to constantly review every time you're rolling out a new feature request or a new update to your CRM. Again, make sure that you're watching how they're doing it. Make sure that that they have a process that works for them and that they're adopting to the process that you've created. So you can create the best process in the world, but if your team is not going to use it, it's not going to be worthwhile at the end of the day. You want to make sure that you're also balancing process performance with business priorities. So a lot of times your team's going to ask for, a streamlined sales process. They want more automation built in. They want it to automatically send a contract, automatically send a quote. And that's great. And yes, you do want to add that to your list of priorities, but you want to make sure that it fits in with what the data in the CRM is telling you, what actually will drive the most performance in your business. Number 3, feature releases. You've heard me use this term a lot. We want to start thinking about every change that we're making to our CRM as a feature release. We want to continuously keep things improving. So think about when the cell phone was first created. The MVP of the cell phone was, I need to be able to call for help while I'm on the road. So it was very limited in who you could call, what you could do, how long you could talk on the phone. And how many people could be involved in the conversation. And then as we grew as a society, as we adopted the cell phone, we started adding feature releases. Not me personally, but our developers and the cell phone creators started adding feature releases. They started saying, all right, now we want to be able to call people further away. Now we want to be able to send text messages. Now we want to be able to take pictures. Now we want to be able to share those pictures. And so now we're at this point where our cell phones are always in our pockets and always being used. And so we've ensured adoption by taking one step at a time. If we had rolled out the iPhone right off the bat, I think everyone would have been incredibly overwhelmed by how to use it. All right, what do these 3 things and really ensuring user adoption and using these developer principles have in common? They all have the key component of this is to ensure that you have a product owner. You have to have someone that's really overseeing your CRM and managing and growing it. And so how do we think about RevOps as the product owner? We're going to talk about how to grow and structure your RevOps team. But first, we're going to define RevOps. Like, what the heck even is RevOps? What is the power of a RevOps team? You've heard me talk about using data and insights to grow your business. How do we actually do that? And then we'll get more into key roles and responsibilities and different ways that we can differentiate roles. I see a couple of questions coming into the chat. We'll save those for the end, but if anyone else has questions as I'm going, please feel free to drop those in. All right, so when you're setting up your CRM, we need to define what RevOps is and what the end state of RevOps is for this process. So we're going to define RevOps as the science of sustainable revenue growth. Your end state is for your data to be so reliable that you can use it to measure the success of your business, action on your insights that you're getting from those measurements, and then ultimately improve business performance by iterating through that process. It's going to take some time to get there, and that's okay. That's why we want to start with this MVP approach and then release features along the way so that you're constantly growing and changing. So let's talk about what this like nirvana of RevOps looks like. There are a few stages that we can travel through to get to this end state of driving business performance using a scientific methodology of sorts. So stage one is going to be purely process and data focused. We've talked about this all the way up till now, getting your MVP in place, making sure that your data is in a place where it's centrally located, where it's easy to pull reports, where you know what's happening, and then getting to a point where you can trust those foundational KPIs. So you want to be able to track some basic things like how many leads have I generated? How many deals have I created? What's my opportunity to customer conversion rate? Stage two is when you can actually rely on those foundational KPIs. So you might be in stage two for a while because you need to ensure adoption of stage one. Stage three is where you're actually starting to iterate. So this is where you can take those foundational KPIs, you can use those data points, and you can start driving some basic initiatives forward that will ultimately impact the bottom line of your organization. Stage four is where you can drill down even further. Which products are performing better? What channels are resulting in higher close won rates? How are our various sales reps or teams performing? And then stage five is your RevOps nirvana, right? You're able to make these small tweaks over here that have huge impacts over there. And so again, this takes time and energy, and it takes ownership. It takes a team of people being dedicated to growing the CRM and making sure that your system is reliable so that you can ultimately drive business improvements. All right, so how do we apply a scientific methodology to this concept of RevOps? Think about fifth grade science class, your first science class that you were in. You were learning the scientific methodology for the first time. And here are your basic steps. You're going to ask a question, you're going to do some research, you're going to form a hypothesis of some sort based on that research. You're going to plan some sort of an experiment, and then you're going to have data to analyze and draw conclusions from. We want to do the same thing with our CRM, with the data that's available to us in our CRM. So let's look at an example here. Let's follow this scientific methodology. So starting off with our question, maybe my question is, how can I improve my opportunity to customer conversion rate? So I need to do some research. I'm going to take a look at my reports. I'm going to say how many deals are being created, how many are making it all the way through the funnel, and what is the conversion rate between each step, and where is some of the larger drop-offs? So then we're going to make a hypothesis, and it's important here to test only one thing at a time. Again, go back to that fifth grade science class, you learned about variables. Make sure that you only have one variable that you're testing and trying to change at a time. And so we can make a hypothesis that, all right, there's a large drop off from qualification to discovery. That likely means that we're getting a lot of unqualified leads from marketing to sales. So then we're going to form some sort of an experiment. All right, let's redefine what qualifies a lead to be passed to sales. Let's implement it and let's adopt it. This is going to be your longest phase. That adoption piece is key. And that's, again, it's okay that adoption takes time. We want to make sure that it is worthwhile. Once you've rolled out a new feature release, like an updated lead qualification process, then you're going to analyze your data. You can revisit it quarter over quarter. All right, did our conversion from qualification to discovery improve? Did it not? Then you're going to draw conclusions and then repeat. So then you can start working your way methodically through these sales stages and conversion rates. You can do this with almost any data point in your CRM. All right, so then how does RevOps fit into this? So RevOps is going to be your product owner. They're going to be responsible for ultimately getting all of your data in one place, driving to those foundational KPIs, ensuring adoption so that that data is trustworthy, and then measuring the KPIs, analyzing the data, and using that to drive business performance, make recommendations, build new processes. So let's get into how to structure your RevOps team. So your RevOps team is really going to sit on top of the whole customer journey. It's going to look at everything from leads coming into your system all the way through to deals closing, the customer success onboarding process, the renewal process, etc. And so some key responsibilities and roles for RevOps individuals or teams at an organization are going to be, first and foremost, to understand what's happening across the board. What is the customer journey? What does it look like? And where are any gaps or drop-offs in terms of data that we're capturing? Are we capturing every data point along their journey correctly? Then we're going to establish processes and oversee those processes to make sure that the data is following the journey consistently and that we're able to report on and draw conclusions from each step of the customer journey. Key part of this, I've said this a zillion times, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, is ensuring adoption. So key part of RevOps team is to ensure adoption, and it might look like holding the sales rep's hand for a month, getting on a call with them every single day to review the leads that are coming in and make sure that they're updating properties correctly so that our data points are being tracked fully and correctly. We're also responsible for aligning stakeholders. So we want to make sure that stakeholders across these different departments, marketing, sales, customer service, finance team, are all aligned and on the same page in terms of what projects and initiatives we need to prioritize in order to grow business. And then reporting and analytics. There's a lot of reporting and data involved in RevOps. You want to have a CRM that is trustworthy so that you can look at each of those data points and then draw accurate conclusions from them. So that's why our processes and our data oversight and our adoption is so important, because we need that ability to trust the reporting and analytics that we're doing. From that reporting, we can then make recommendations, drive decisions, ensure alignment, and ultimately grow the business. All right, so there are a lot of ways that you can differentiate roles here, and you can think about how to start growing your team. I would say the first hire or the first role that needs to be filled is someone needs to own the strategy behind your CRM. Someone needs to own the processes, needs to own that big picture oversight of what's being built, how are we tracking, and how are we ensuring that the system is meeting our business needs. That person is going to be the one that's also prioritizing your feature releases as the data is telling you certain things and as your teams are telling you other things. All right, other ways that you can start delineating roles out, data analysts. If you have lots of channels, if you're especially once you reach that stage 4 where you're getting into partitioning your data and you have much more complex channels, multiple products, multiple pipelines, lots of sales reps, you might need to think about having a person dedicated to data analysis. You also might think about adding someone that's responsible for the daily maintenance, the CRM administration component. As you grow your CRM and roll out more and more feature releases, there are more and more bugs that might pop up for you throughout your product. And so it becomes helpful to have someone who can troubleshoot things or who can be be more of an order taker. It's really important that the RevOps leader does not become an order taker, but they're able to view the insights and the data that the CRM is producing and then make recommendations. And so oftentimes it's helpful to have someone that can take on those more ad hoc admin type of tasks. A developer is also a really helpful role to have on board as well, especially if you have multiple sources that your data is coming from. So if you're using multiple systems, maybe you have a separate billing system or a separate customer service system, maybe you have a custom app that your organization has produced, you want to make sure that all of those data points are getting integrated into your CRM as its central source of truth. And so it might be worthwhile to have someone own all of those integrations, especially if there are very technical components to it. And then you can also think about adding specific ops roles for the different teams so that we can essentially have liaisons across different departments that can then bubble up to the RevOps leader. And so it's important to know that like this is not a copy paste one size fits all approach. Every business is going to be different. It's going to depend on the size of your business, the state of your business, the products that you're selling, and ultimately where you fall in that revenue operations maturity stage. So wherever you are with this, that you have lots of different options. You also always have the option to hire these as individual contributors on your team. You can also partner with a solutions partner through HubSpot, someone like RevPartners who can fit one or many of these roles. So lots of different ways to think about growing your team. Hopefully this gave you at least a high level overview of how to think about structuring your CRM as a product instead of a project. And hopefully you guys took something away from this. We're going to transition into some question and answer time. I see a few questions in here, and I also see a few chats. And I'm going to read through the chats first. Are we doing X? Are we monitoring Y? What's happening? Yes, exactly. Yes, we need to be able to monitor all those things. All right, let's look at our chats. Read through some of these. All right, Matt asked, does this framework apply to smaller sales teams that are scaling as well, such as 2 AEs and 1 BDR? Would we wait until the team is bigger to work on this? That's a great question. I think that it really comes down to where your organization is in that RevOps maturity stage. Let me look at back, pull this up. So I think if you're still in this stage 1, it doesn't quite matter how many sales reps you have. I would say that it's more around where are you in your maturity. And so think about it more as your CRM matures, then you need to hire more or scale your RevOps team versus as your team size grows. All right, how do I get buy-in from the, hit done. Okay, sorry. Managing this Q&A box. Okay. How do you get buy-in from the CEO or CFO to budget and implement these changes? Can you speak to the impact of RevOps as the business scales? Definitely. So as your business scales, RevOps becomes more and more important because you need those smaller changes, right? So once you get to this stage 4, stage 5, it's these smaller levers that can be pulled that have much larger implications down the road. And so I would say as you're scaling your business, RevOps becomes even more important because you don't want to be wasting resources, wasting time, causing friction between departments, et cetera. And so RevOps is really, think about it as like the engine behind your CRM and allowing your CRM to ultimately tell you what your business is doing and interpret the health of your business. All right, what do you think the primary difference in skill set is between a strategist and an admin? That's a great question. I would say starting with a strategist is really focused on the data analytics, making recommendations and driving things forward. And so the strategist is really focusing on strategy, that high level, where is the business now? Where do we need to be? And how do we get there? I would say an admin is helpful in the how do we get there stage and in the maintenance stage of, can you help me build this workflow? Can you add this custom property? The admin is maybe more of a role taker than necessarily a strategy driver. How do we measure RevOps KPIs if teams and processes are changing at the same time in the company as a whole? Well, I would say that KPIs, you want to have like your top level KPIs that are going to be consistent no matter if your teams or processes are changing. And so you have this high level foundational KPIs that pretty much every business is going to be tracking. And that's going to look like, how many leads are we generating? What's our MQL to SQL conversion rate? How many deals have we been created this quarter? How many of those have we closed? So you're going to be following the customer journey, and that's going to be more your high level KPIs. And then I would say as your processes are changing, you might have more specific KPIs per team or per process that you're trying to produce. So let's say you're trying to get your team to adopt something like using the lead status property. You might have a whole separate dashboard in HubSpot that you use to ensure adoption of that one specific property. Like you can have multiple reports tracking adoption on one tiny little thing. And so I would say that your KPIs for your processes are probably going to change as you continue adding processes and changing processes. But then you're always going to have these like high level KPIs that will stay the same. Hopefully that answered your question, Kate. All right, we have about 5 minutes. Let me read through a couple more of these. Ooh, tips for getting engagement and adoption from the team. This is a great one. I think one of the first ones that I would say is just sitting there and watching them do the thing that you're trying to get them to adopt. If you're trying to get them to, create deals correctly, sit down and watch a rep enter like 15 deals and see if they're doing it how you want them to. If there's anything that's like obviously disruptive to their process that you're trying to put on them. Listen, if I can create a process for a sales rep all day, but if I don't actually do it myself, or if that's not my daily job, it might not be the best process. And so sitting there and watching them is going to be probably the first step that I would recommend. And then another thing that I like to recommend is make dashboards for everything, make reports for everything. Anytime you don't want something to happen, make a report saying when it happens and make it on a public dashboard that gets sent out to the sales team weekly. That way everyone knows like what went wrong and how we can improve. Your goal for that dashboard should be like net zero, like nothing should show up on that report. And that would be full adoption for the week that you're sending that report out. So I see those are my 2 top tips for getting engagement and adoption. How does a RevOps system work in a company where sales and service ops are performed by the same team? That is a great question. I would say RevOps still sits on top of all of that. And so your RevOps team is really going to look at the process as a whole from beginning of the customer journey all the way through to the end. And so it's hard when you're in a smaller startup type environment. People might be wearing multiple hats. You might have sales members that are also onboarding their new customers. You might have sales team members that are working on RevOps initiatives. And so I think that it really comes down to this concept of like having someone own the CRM that can drive some level of decisions to get started on RevOps. And then as you scale, obviously you need to differentiate those roles. Sales should be responsible for selling, service should be responsible for service, RevOps should be responsible for RevOps. Let's see. Ooh, in our company, we solve everything by adding another app. The problem is it's creating murky data. Any thoughts? This is great. I would say the first thing that your organization should do, if they have not done this already, is map out the entire journey. Pull up Miro or Lucidchart or a freaking whiteboard. I don't care what you use. Just draw out every single touch point that a customer has with your business. Start at like your website or ads that are driving to your website, landing pages that they're converting on, follow all the way through and really understand what's happening on the customer journey first, and then kind of back into what apps do we need list out all the tools that you're using in that map. So if by the time the customer gets to the sales team, the deals are being entered into HubSpot, and then by the time they get to the onboarding team, a set of tasks is being created in Asana, and then billing is billing out of Chargebee. Like map out all of those tools in that process documentation. And then I would say kind of rewind and see, okay, are there any areas that we can consolidate? For example, are we using a quotes tool, but we could use the quote tool in HubSpot? Are we using WordPress forms, but we could use HubSpot forms? See what we can consolidate. And then it's true, HubSpot is not intended to be an all-on-one. Like, they're not trying to solve every single problem. They want to be able to play nicely with other apps. But you do need to be careful that you're not just adding an app in every time you need something. So I would say process mapping, reviewing the use case for the app, understanding if another app that you currently have will solve that same problem. Then if you do need that additional app, that's totally fine. Add that app in and just make sure that the data points are syncing in correctly to your CRM, and that nothing's like, there's no gaps or overlap in data. You're not double counting revenue for some reason because you're integrating with a payment system, for example. All right, we have about 1 more minute. I will answer one more. I'm just going to take a quick pass through these questions. Show the role of a RevOps leader. Do you think that there exists a structure where exists other RevOps leaders, or do you think only one RevOps leader is sufficient on the company? I think that kind of depends on the size of your company, the size of the levels of maturity, how mature your RevOps instance is. I would say that it's important to have a single person like be the owner. You might end up differentiating by teams, or you might kind of start branching down in the same way that you would expand a sales team by adding, different sales directors underneath your VP of sales, for example. You might start differentiating those, but I would say it always needs to roll up to one person that has oversight over the whole CRM. And that's why that process mapping is so important, to have everything documented in one place so that you can really see the whole journey and understand what processes every team is using and how that impacts what data we're driving in our CRM. All right, I just got to go ahead to go over a few minutes. So if you want to hop, feel free to hop. I will go through the rest of these questions. We'll spend a couple more minutes on questions. If you needed to jump, don't worry about it. Feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn or send me an email if I didn't get to your question. I would be happy to have more conversations about this. Thank you, guys. I will spend about 5 more minutes on some of these questions, though. This was a great question. Where do project or product managers fall in line with the whole RevOps execution process? So I would say your whole RevOps team is really your product manager, your product owner. But you think about like having specific product managers. I would say that it also depends on how you're scaling. So how many tools do you have in your tool belt? So if you have a custom app, if your team, if your company has an app that is your service or your product at the end of the day, you need to have a product manager that's over its own product, but you also need to have a product manager that's over your CRM as a product. And as your CRM grows, you might differentiate between, all right, this person is going to own this piece of the CRM, the marketing piece of the CRM. Maybe this person is going to own all of the workflows that touch marketing. This person's going to own the sales portion of the CRM. But again, they're all bubbling up to one person as the overall leader and owner of the system. What's the best way to administer your CRM? Any tips or tricks? I would say reporting is your friend, and automation is not always your friend. I think that's another big one. people like to say automate everything. I think that automation is sometimes the death of adoption. And so we need to make sure that we're only automating the things that need to be automating or that we know are worth automating. So we're only automating data points that we know are correctly being captured. For example, you don't want to copy over properties from a deal record to a company record automatically right off the bat. You need a period of time where you're manually doing it just to ensure that the end state is being met. So don't automate everything right off the bat, and then create reports on reports, make dashboards for everything, so that you can easily see what's broken, what processes are not being adopted, where there are any gaps along the way, and then ultimately like what levers you need to pull to impact the business. Right? How do you balance not making it difficult for adoption versus just getting the information you need into your CRM? I think that's a great question. A lot of times it is challenging to put processes in place that will get the data where it needs to be. But I think that what it comes down to is if you have an owner that's then like sitting with your sales team and coaching them through the process, you're understanding if this process is not a good one, I guess. So if you're sitting with your sales team as they're entering deals and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the most manual process, it takes them 30 minutes to get a deal entered correctly, then we know that, all right, we need to change something with the process so that we can actually make adoption easier. It doesn't matter what tool you use or what process you have. If your team's not going to use it, they're not going to use it, and it's not going to be worthwhile. All right, most of my time as a full-time in-house sales ops spent building reports that are realistically living in spreadsheets. Is there any value to getting all the data in our CRM? How would you recommend I shift my priorities? Oh yeah, baby, get all that data in your CRM. Spreadsheets are the worst. I think that they're oftentimes the death of good data. Now, that's not to say that like creating pivot tables in Google Sheets is a bad thing. Google Sheets and Excel files have their case. I know that people love them. I love them for certain things. But I would say that you need to have all of your data in one central location. If you are having to constantly go back and forth between HubSpot and a Google Sheet to actually understand how much revenue you've closed, that's a problem. Or if you're having to do math that's like across multiple tools to understand conversion rates, that's a problem. We need to have those core foundational KPIs as well as like the majority of your customer journey in your CRM. And then you can export it and pivot in spreadsheets as much as you want, if you feel the need to do so. But for the most part, I would say there is a ton of value in getting all your data in your CRM. All right, and last one, what is the most difficult thing to get right when it comes to RevOps? I would say adoption. I just think that adoption is the most important part, but it often is the most difficult thing to get correct and to get your teams actually using the systems correctly. And that's why it's so important to use this MVP and feature release concept, because we need to make sure that we are ensuring adoption. Otherwise, what you're building and the time that you're spending in your CRM is totally worthless, essentially. I would say that if you can roll things out slowly and iteratively instead of shifting to becoming an order taker, it will really impact the way that your CRM ultimately grows and is able to be used for the better. Take a quick chat through the chat one more time. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining. I will turn it back over to Amanda if you have any final words to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah, for taking the time to host us today. And a big thanks to everyone for joining us and being engaged and asking questions. We love that. We'll be providing a recording of the presentation. So if you missed anything or want to revisit any of it, you'll have that chance to do so. So keep an eye on your inbox for the email with all the details We really appreciate your commitment to continuous learning, and it's so inspiring. We hope you found Hannah's hug informative and valuable and exciting. I know that I did, and I just thank you so much. And we will have more announcements for future events and more updates. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you guys.
Thank y'all. Have a good one.
Bye.